when this man started dragging a huge, heavy piano into the middle of a dense jungle. The people watching him thought he had completely lost his mind. They stood back, whispering to each other, terrified of what was about to happen. He was pushing the instrument right into the territory of huge, wild animals. Some of these creatures weighed over 5 tons. Many of them had spent years being abused by humans and were known to be unpredictable or even dangerous. Everyone waited to see how the giant animals would react to the strange noise and the strange man. They held their breath as he sat down on the small stool, his back turned to the massive beasts. But what happened next was something no one in the world expected. This man was Paul Barton. Born in Yorkshire, the UK, Paul was a gifted artist and a talented pianist from a very young age. He had the kind of classical training and raw talent that could have taken him to the biggest stages in London, Paris, or New York. He could have lived a life of comfort and luxury, playing for wealthy audiences in fancy suits. But Paul had a different kind of heart. He felt that the successful life in the West was missing something fundamental. He was searching for something more, something deeper than just applause and money. In 1996, at the age of 35, he made a decision that would change his life forever. He decided to leave the gray skies of England behind and travel to Thailand. He was looking for adventure, but he found something much more profound. He didn't know it yet, but this trip wasn't just a vacation. It was the beginning of a journey that would touch millions of hearts around the world. When he arrived in Thailand, he fell in love with the country instantly. He loved the warmth of the people, the spice of the food, and the richness of the culture. He even met his future wife, Kwan, a Thai artist who shared his passion for creativity. They fell in love and got married. But Paul's artistic soul often needed to escape the chaos of the city, drawing him to the quiet mountains of Kanchanaburi. While he was building a new life, this man came across something that broke his heart into pieces. He learned about the dark side of the elephant industry. One afternoon, while walking through a bustling market with an elderly local guide named Lek, they saw a gaunt elephant begging for fruit from tourists. Paul stopped, staring at the majestic animal reduced to a street performer. "Why is he here?" he asked. Lek sighed deeply, his eyes tracing the scars on the elephant's legs. "He is a refugee of progress, Mr. Paul," Lek said, his voice heavy with regret. "For centuries these giants were our kings. But then came the logging. We forced them to pull heavy teak logs through the forest until they collapsed. We broke their spirits to build our houses." Paul listened in horror as Lek explained that even after logging was banned in 1989, the nightmare didn't end. "When the work stopped, the hunger started," Lek whispered, watching the elephant reach out its trunk for a small banana. Their owners could not afford to feed them, so now the kings of the jungle are unemployed. They must beg in the dirty streets just to survive. Paul saw elephants that were shells of their former selves. They were old and injured. Some had stepped on landmines left over from border conflicts, blowing off parts of their feet. Many were blind from the bright sun or from infections that were never treated. These gentle giants, who should have been roaming free with their families, were left broken and lonely. Paul then visited a place called Elephant's World, a sanctuary near the famous River Kwai. This was a place dedicated to caring for these old and sick elephants. It was a retirement home where they could finally rest, eat, and bathe in the river. But when Paul looked at them, he saw something that made him sad. Even though they were safe, many of the elephants stood still for hours. They looked bored. They looked like they were missing something. Some of them would rock back and forth, a sign of deep stress and trauma. It kept Paul awake at night. He knew these animals had food and water, but he felt they needed something for their souls. They needed healing that medicine couldn't provide. That is when he had a crazy idea. He thought about the music he loved so much. He thought about how classical music made him feel calm and peaceful. And he wondered, if music can heal a human heart, could it heal an elephant's heart too? He shared his thought with his wife Kwan as they sat on their porch late one night. She looked at his hands, his livelihood, the tools of his art, and then out at the dark silhouette of the jungle. She knew the danger better than anyone. However, she didn't try to stop him. She simply took his hand and asked, "Do you think they will listen?" "I have to find out," Paul whispered. Next, he told the people at the sanctuary about his plan. He wanted to bring a real upright piano into the mud and dirt of the sanctuary. The logistics alone were a nightmare. Pianos are delicate instruments. They are made of wood, felt, and tensioned strings. They hate humidity and direct sunlight. Dragging one into a Thai jungle is a death sentence for the instrument. But the broken instrument wasn't the only concern. The real danger was much more immediate. When Paul pitched his idea, the sanctuary staff didn't just look at him like he was crazy. They looked at him with genuine fear. One of the head mahouts, a veteran keeper named Somchai who had spent many years living among these giants, stepped forward. He grabbed Paul's arm gently but firmly, shaking his head. Somchai pointed his finger at a massive bull elephant in the distance. "Mr. Paul, you don't understand," Somchai said, his voice low and serious. "You see a gentle friend. I see 5 tons of raw power. These animals have been hurt by men. They have memories. If they don't like the noise you make, if they get scared, a piano is nothing to them. It will be like a toothpick. And you?" The old keeper's warning hung in the air. "They can snap a teak tree in half when they are annoyed. Please, think about this." Paul swallowed hard. He looked at his fragile hands, then at the massive animals grazing in the distance. For a second, the reality of the danger set in. He almost turned back, but Paul was determined. He believed in the universal power of the music. He believed that these animals deserved to hear something beautiful after years of hearing only chains and shouting. So, he did it. With the help of some strong volunteers and his wife Kwan, who was there to document the journey, he hauled his battered upright piano up the mountain. It was backbreaking work. "Paul, the wheels are stuck. It's too heavy," one volunteer shouted, wiping sweat from his eyes. Paul gritted his teeth, digging his boots into the mud. "Just to the clearing," he grunted. "One last push." They pushed and pulled the heavy instrument over rocks and through the dust until they found a flat spot under the shade of the trees. Paul sat down at the keys. He wiped his damp palms on his trousers, trying to steady them. "Just breathe," he told himself, closing his eyes for a second. Not far away, a group of elephants was eating breakfast. Among them was an old, blind elephant named Plara. Plara had a hard life. He had been used in the logging industry for years. His tusks had been removed by poachers, and he had lost his sight. He was a tough survivor, but he had every reason to hate humans. As Paul lifted his hands to play, the wind blew through the trees. The crowd of keepers and volunteers went silent. They watched nervously. Paul pressed the keys. The first notes of Beethoven floated out into the hot jungle air. The sound was strange in the forest. Usually, the only sounds were birds, insects, and the rustling of leaves. The clear sound of the piano was something these animals had never heard before. Then everyone looked at Plara as the massive elephant stopped eating. He had a mouthful of grass, but he froze. He lifted his trunk into the air, sniffing the wind. He turned his giant head toward the sound. Slowly, carefully, Plara began to walk toward Paul. The people watching wanted to shout, to warn Paul to run. But Paul kept playing. He didn't stop or look back with fear. He just poured his heart into the music. Plara walked right up to the piano. He was so close that he could have swept the piano away with one swing of his trunk. Suddenly, Plara's ears flared out wide. A low, vibrating rumble started deep in the elephant's throat, a sound so deep Paul could feel it rattling in his own chest. The volunteers behind Paul gasped and took a sharp step back. In the crowd, Paul's wife's hands shook as she held the camera. She watched the massive animal tower over the man she loved, terrified she was about to record his death. "He's going to charge," someone whispered frantically. Paul's instinct screamed at him to run. Every survival signal in his brain yelled, "Get up! Run! Now!" The animal was towering over him, a wall of gray muscle and potential fury. But Paul forced his fingers to stay on the keys. He closed his eyes, refusing to show fear. He took a shaky breath and transitioned into a softer movement of the sonata. Then the tension broke and something miraculous happened. The blind elephant stood still. He closed his eyes. His ears, which usually flap to keep flies away, stopped moving. He stood in perfect silence, just listening. It looked like he was in a trance. For the first time in years, the tension left his body. The music seemed to wash over him like a cool river. But then, Plara did something that made the tears start to fall for the people watching. As Paul played the slow, sad melody, the elephant began to sway. He wasn't rocking from stress anymore. He was dancing. He moved his trunk in time with the rhythm. He leaned in closer, resting his trunk on the side of the piano, feeling the vibrations of the wood. It was as if he was trying to hug the music. Paul slowly lifted his hands from the keys, letting the final note fade into the jungle heat. He looked up at the massive trunk swaying just inches above his head. "You're not a monster, are you?" Paul whispered, his voice trembling with relief. "You're just lonely." Plara didn't pull away. He simply exhaled a warm breath over Paul's hands. In the crowd, Quan lowered her camera, her fear replaced by awe. "He's not attacking," she breathed out to the volunteer beside her. "He's listening. He actually likes it." The connection between the man and the beast was instant. They didn't speak the same language. They were different species. But in that moment, as Paul reached out to gently pat the rough skin of the trunk, they were just two beings sharing a beautiful song. In the silence that followed, Paul looked up. He saw Somchai standing at the edge of the clearing. The old mahout, who had spent many years believing these animals could only be controlled by force, had tears in his eyes. He slowly took off his hat and bowed his head as a sign of deep respect. On a scale of 1 to 10, how beautiful was that moment? Rate it in the comments. After that day, Paul knew he couldn't stop. He came back again and again. He met another elephant named Lam Duan. She was also blind and very old. She had spent most of her life working in the noisy streets of the city. She was often nervous and jumpy. When Paul started playing for her, she walked over immediately. She didn't just listen, she seemed to get lost in the sound. She would stand by the piano for hours. Sometimes, when Paul stopped playing, Lam Duan would gently touch the keys with her trunk, as if asking him not to stop. She would make soft sounds, talking to him in her own way. The videos of these moments started to spread around the world. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. They saw a tiny man sitting at a piano, surrounded by the lush green jungle. And standing next to him, like giant statues, were these massive elephants. They weren't chained or forced to stay there. They could have walked away at any moment. But they chose to stay. Some people on the internet said it was fake. They said the elephants were trained to stand there. But Paul explained the truth. He never used food to bribe them. He never used commands. "The elephants are free to walk about around the piano," Paul said. "They are not chained or tethered in any way. If they didn't like the music, then they could simply wander off." But they rarely walked away. In fact, some of the wilder, more aggressive bull elephants showed the biggest changes. One bull elephant, known for being dangerous, would become as gentle as a puppy when the music started. He would stand with his mouth open, completely relaxed, letting the melody calm his angry spirit. Paul experimented with different songs. He played Chopin, Bach, and Schubert. He found that the elephants had preferences. Some liked slow, calming music. Others seemed to enjoy faster, brighter tunes. It was amazing to see that these animals had their own tastes, just like humans. One day, something truly special happened with an elephant named Mongkol. Mongkol was a former logging elephant who had seen terrible things. He was very shy and didn't trust people easily. Paul sat down to play a slow, emotional piece. As the music filled the air, Mongkol lay down on the ground next to the piano. This is something elephants only do when they feel completely safe. He closed his eyes and let out a long, deep sigh. Paul kept playing, looking down at his friend with love and respect. It was a picture of pure peace. However, time in the jungle is not always kind. As the years passed, the elephants Paul loved began to grow old. And one day, the inevitable happened. Plara, the first elephant to ever dance to the music, fell gravely ill. An infection took hold of his tired body, and he could no longer stand. The keepers knew his time was coming to an end. Paul received the call and rushed to the sanctuary. But he didn't bring medicine. He brought the only thing he knew Plara wanted. The piano was set up one last time near the spot where Plara lay in the dust. The great elephant was weak, his breathing shallow. But when he heard the first notes of his favorite song, his ears flickered. Paul played with tears streaming down his face. He didn't play for an audience or for the cameras. He played a final lullaby for his friend. As the music rose and fell, Plara's breathing slowed. He didn't struggle and didn't seem afraid. He simply listened, surrounded by the people who loved him and the melody that had given him peace. Plara passed away that evening, right there beside the piano. He died not as a broken beast of burden, but as a beloved soul, carried away on the wings of a song. If Plara's story touched you, leave a RIP or a heart emoji in the comments to pay your respects to this beautiful soul. The man who had once dreamed of playing in big concert halls in London realized that this was the best audience he could ever ask for. They listen with their whole hearts, Paul said later in an interview. They don't judge you if you play a wrong note. They don't care if your shirt is ironed. They just appreciate that you are there with them, he said. Through his music, Paul showed the world a side of elephants that few people had ever seen. He showed that they are not just working machines or circus acts. They are sensitive, emotional, and intelligent beings. He showed that they feel pain, but they also feel joy. He proved that you don't need chains or fear to control an elephant. You just need empathy. Paul's work inspired people everywhere to look at animals differently. He showed us that kindness is a universal language. Whether you are a human from England or an elephant from Thailand, we all respond to love and beauty. The videos of Paul and the elephants have now been viewed by millions of people around the globe. Each view helps raise awareness for the sanctuary and helps provide food and medicine for these rescued giants. Paul continues to go into the jungle, dragging his piano with him. He is older now, and the work is hard. The Thai heat is intense, and the piano is heavy. But he says he will never stop. As long as they want to listen, he says, I will play for them. Visitors to the sanctuary often leave with tears in their eyes. They come expecting to see just animals, but they leave having witnessed a miracle. They see the bond between Paul and his friends, and they realize that the world is full of magic if you just know where to look. What did you think was going to happen when he started playing? Did you think the elephants would get angry? Have you ever seen an animal react to music like that? Let us know in the comments below. It is truly a story that touches the soul. It makes you wonder what other secrets these amazing animals are hiding. If you liked this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. It helps more people learn about these beautiful creatures and the people who help them. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.